Hey everybody, so in this edition of Beyond the Vocabulary, we're going to be looking at cell division, both types. This is at the AP biology level, so I'm assuming that you know a little bit about cell division and what we're doing here. So I'm going to try to explain to you the basics and some of the vocabulary that we're using for both of these types of cell division. So if we look at this table here, we're looking at how two types of cells multiply. Okay, so we have over here mitosis in this row and meiosis over here. So when you look at mitosis, the types of cells that are produced are somatic. Another way of saying somatic is body cells. So examples of that would be neurons in the nervous system, liver cells, generally speaking, organ cells that make up organ tissues, skin cells, etc. Now, when I say ploidy, which is sort of an odd way of saying a word, I'm talking about whether or not it's diploid or haploid, the cells that are being duplicated by the mitotic cell cycle. So the ploidy for mitosis, cells produced through the mitotic cell cycle, is diploid. What diploid means is that there are two sets of chromosomes. So it has nothing to do with the number of chromosomes in a set. It has nothing to do with the total number of chromosomes. It's basically saying that there are two sets, which is universal for all diploid organisms. It's just a simple definition saying there are two sets of chromosomes, and we'll revisit that in a moment. So for that, two sets. Rounds of division. So in the mitotic cell cycle, there's just one round of division. Basically, you're duplicating your genetic material and then you're dividing that genetic material into two cells, getting back to that original number, which again we'll revisit in another slide in the future here. So number of cells produced. So you go from having one parent cell to two daughter cells. So this would be your parent cell that you're starting out with here, and these would be the two daughters. So you're producing two cells. Now let's take a quick look at meiosis, or the meiotic cell cycle. Cell types being produced are gametic. So they're your gametes. Another way of saying that are sex cells, and examples of that are sperm and eggs or ova. Okay, the ploidy of meiotic cells is haploid. That is to say they have one set, keep on popping to that picture there, of chromosomes. So there's only one set there. And that means there's going to be one set in a sperm or one set in an egg. Okay, the difference here, a key difference between these two types of cell division is that meiosis has two rounds. So you get two rounds of division there to get to a haploid state, which we'll visualize here in another slide. And because you have two rounds, you end up with more cells here. So in this case, you would end up with 4 cells. Whereas in this case, you would end up with 2 with mitosis, okay? So that sets up a couple of pictures here. You can finally get to this giraffe picture we keep jumping to. So for a giraffe that has a 2n of 30, you can visualize both types of cell cycle pretty easily. So let's describe what this means right here. So this n stands for number of chromosomes in a set. So n equals number in set. When you put a 2 around that, it's saying this is the number of chromosomes you see in diploid cells. So this is the number of chromosomes you see in 2 sets. One set from the male, one set from the female. So from this, you can say that diploid cells for a giraffe have 30 chromosomes. And if you were to divide this 2n by 2, you would see that n equals 15. So the haploid number equals 15. That means that there are 15 chromosomes in a set. Okay, so let's pause that for a second and go back here for a moment. I'm going to erase all this. Okay, and I'm going to show you the differences between mitosis up here, so the mitotic cell cycle up here, and the meiotic cell cycle up here, down here, with our friend the giraffe as an example. Okay, so if you start off with the 2n equals 30, there are 30 chromosomes in that diploid cell. So say the giraffe was attacked and it needed to close a wound. So it would use the mitotic cell to do that. It'd use the mitotic cell to replicate diploid cells to close that wound. So here's how we think about it in our class. So if you have 30 chromosomes, you need to duplicate an S phase of interphase. You need to duplicate your genetic material because if you're going to go on to become two cells, you're going to want to have enough genetic material to have two full complements in those daughter cells. So we double that number and we say 60, but really what we're talking about now are 60 sister chromatids. Okay, so that's 60 duplicated chromosomes. So this would be this would go on to be one chromosome, and this would go on to be another chromosome. So that's ultimately going to represent two chromosomes down the line. So I have my students duplicate that number. They double that number, and then they go through mitosis. So at the end of anaphase of mitosis in the mitotic phase, you're going to have two daughter cells. Each is going to have 30 chromosomes, and we're going to get back to that original 2n number here for the giraffe. Okay, but you're going from having, originally one parent cell to two daughter cells, but with equal amounts of genetic material in those daughter cells. Now, creating haploid gametes is a different process. So we use the meiotic cell cycle to do that. Now, a lot of the steps of the actual division process are the same, with the exception that now we're going to do 2 rounds of division, as we showed in that graph before. So let's, again, look at a 2n of 30, because keep in mind the cells that are performing meiosis are themselves diploid. That's something that a lot of students don't take into consideration. Those cells have a diploid 2n number. So just like in the mitotic cell cycle, in meiosis in S phase of interphase, you're going to duplicate your genetic material. So we go up to 60 sister chromatids. And now we're going to do 2 rounds of division. So we're going to divide that into these cells, which will have 30 and 30, and then we're going to do another round of division here in meiosis 2, and we're going to divide those two 30s into 15, 15, 15, and 15 chromosomes. So now we have 4 cells with half the amount of chromosomes as your original diploid cell. So remember, we said n equals half of that 2n. So now we're looking at n equals 15, which is what we've achieved here. So we're good to go with that. So that's a little brief description of the differences between the mitotic cell cycle that produces diploid cells and the meiotic cell cycle, which produces haploid gametes used for reproduction. Let's take a quick look at a karyotype. So a karyotype is a visual representation of an organism's genome, or its entire collection of genetic material. And so before we just said that for a giraffe, n equals 15. So that is the amount of chromosomes you see in, for example, an egg or a sperm. If you bring together an egg and a sperm, which each have an N, you're going to be looking at a 2N number, which equals 30. So I've given you a visual representation of all 30 chromosomes. Keep in mind, though, that because one of each of those pairs is coming from dad, like that one, you're going to see 15 pairs. So 15 pairs here would give you that 2N of 30. Now the karyotype comes into play later when we're doing genetic crosses, because what you see on here are genes. So for homologous chromosomes like this, you'd see genes occurring in the same loci, the same location. So this is just a visual representation of what we just discussed, showing that male contributes 15. So you can see 15 chromosomes there with the green male sign, and 15 female with the female sign there. And they come together, the two gametes, during reproduction, and they lead to that first diploid cell that we call a zygote. Okay, so this would be what you'd see inside of a zygote after reproduction. So that's just some basic vocabulary if you're struggling putting it all together. Now we could very easily change, and I'll probably put up another video showing, you know, a different organism here instead of the giraffe, whose 2N will be something totally different depending on the organism. So stay tuned for that if you need extra help with that. But hopefully this was helpful in clarifying some of that vocabulary.